friends, it's just me, Emily. Welcome to my podcast where we explore how to discover your soul's purpose, embody your essence, and live a life in alignment with your truth. Today, I am excited to share an epiphany moment that I had with you that is literally changing the way that I live my life. And I am hoping that in sharing the story with you, it will change yours as well. And what's so cool is that I have been on this soul searching journey for 2 years now. Many of you know that this podcast actually was birthed through the year one of that soul searching journey. And year two, as I talked about in my last podcast episode, was all about, finally putting the pieces of the puzzle together and figuring out what my soul's purpose in terms of this next body of work looked like in a grounded, practical form, and really being the embodiment of the person who I need to be in order to live out this second iteration of our purpose. Because one thing I've discovered through this work is that your purpose continues to evolve as you do. Life is going to throw us lessons and challenges and obstacles that continue to shape us and force us to strip away the layers of who we thought we were in this lifetime to get closer to who we actually are, who we are at our essence. So I've definitely been on that journey. I hope that in sharing my story, you're seeing glimmers of yourself as well, and taking the lessons that, and the mistakes that I've made and figuring out how to apply them in your life. So if the podcast has been supportive for you, I would be so honored if you would leave a comment or a review. So I just know that this is landing. So today I want to talk to you about how death is the key to making the most out of life, and how this is literally I'm obsessed with this topic, and this is what I am going to be creating a whole new body of work around. You'll be getting a sneak peek a little bit later here in the episode, so stay tuned. But even when I say death, just notice what arises in your body. Is there resistance? Does your chest tighten? Do you want to just, hit pause and put down your phone and not listen to this anymore? Because so many of us have a natural aversion to death. And if you think about this from a very biological level, animals, humans, anything that's living is programmed to survive. And in the quest for survival, we're literally trying to outrun death. So just permission and validation to feel what you're feeling, it's totally normal. And what I've discovered is that in our denial of death and in our pursuit to push it into the shadows of society and into our psyche, it subconsciously runs our lives. And it also leaves us kind of feeling numb and disconnected to life. Because without death, you don't have life. It literally, they're inextricably intertwined. One gives meaning to the other. And when you don't put this capstone, this end point on your life, life would just go on forever. So it's the ending that actually gives the story, right? That final chapter. It gives it the narrative mythic arc. And if our lives just went on forever, there wouldn't be any meaning attached to it, right? So it's the death, the closing chapter that really does give meaning to our life. I realized this through a series of different events, and but it all kind of started around the time that I took this soul searching journey, right? It was about 4 years after Ian died. My business was really successful. I had grown this massive online community, launched a book deal, a clothing line, had TV appearances. Not only was the business successful, but in my love life, I had fallen in love again. We had blended families. On the surface, everything looked quote unquote great. But the truth is, on the inside, I felt numb. I kind of felt dead. I had this sense of apathy rolling in that I had never felt before. And so that's what kind of prompted my soul search journey to begin with. And so if you listen to some of the earlier podcast episodes on why this podcast started, it was literally because of that. And I worked with all sorts of different types of healers, somatic coaches, spiritual guides. I sat with psychedelics. everything. And I interviewed a lot of them on this podcast. But even that journey became kind of a hamster wheel of seeking yet another thing outside of myself. Have any of you guys felt that way, where you're like this holy grail of purpose or searching for the thing that's going to heal that childhood wound and change everything? It's like, okay, yes, and it becomes like another thing, just like success or a man or impact, money, that's going to make us feel a certain way. We chase these things outside of ourselves, thinking that they're going to resolve an inner need. So the answer didn't actually come through any of those modalities. Those modalities were great, and they helped me understand who I was and what my purpose is and heal a lot of inner wounds and all the things. But the missing piece of the puzzle came when I was on a walk with my dog, Miley. We were walking to the University of Denver, which is where my late husband, Ian, and I met. And as we were walking, over the loudspeakers came the song, Dancing in the Moonlight, if you guys know that. And that was our wedding song. And so immediately I got chills, and it like transported me back in time to this moment where Ian was sitting on our back porch. His skin was like blotchy from cancer treatments. His stomach was a little bit distended. He was so weak, right? Like his muscles had definitely gotten a lot smaller. And yet, despite, cancer and chemicals like moving through his body and this like demure shape that he had kind of become, this like shell, his spirit just looked so alive. Like he's sitting there with his eyes closed and he's sucking on this popsicle, rocking in a chair and soaking in the sunshine and just like savoring the sweetness of the moment. Like it was literally being imprinted on his bones. And in that moment, it just something sparked within me. And I was like, oh my God, like here was Ian 6 months before he passed away, barely able to move his body. Like he had so much pain, just looking so alive. And then there's me, who's healthy, has this successful business, this chapter 2 romance, like all the things that you could ask for, but feeling numb and apathetic and dead inside. And just like the contrast hit me. And it made me start to think that maybe the missing ingredient here is death. The fact that Ian was so close to death is what made him actually feel that much more alive and savor the sweetness, savor the nectar of life. And I'll get into that a little bit later, because this is where some of the real like lessons started coming in that have really been changing my life now. But in that moment, I just kept exploring. I just kept exploring this concept. Is death the key to perhaps making the most out of life? And this was like earlier on this year, and I was still doing a lot of my soul searching work. And I was in ceremony with one of my mentors, Sarah Jenks. She's going to be on the podcast in a couple of weeks now. And we were in ceremony, and that's when I saw, and I talked about this on my last podcast, all this death imagery come through, like serpents and black candles. And I was holding a staff with a skull. And I was just like, oh man, like more death. Gosh, I can't get away from it. But then in another ceremony we did, I just got this like clear download, like this clear message came through. And it was just like, Emily, show people the magic of life. And so as I sat with that and then thought of the memory of Ian and the popsicle and all of the death imagery, again, kind of putting all of the pieces of the puzzle together, I believe that my soul's purpose is to show people the beauty of life by embracing death. Death is the tool, it's the modality, it's the how, it's the process. And it's one of the many things that so many of us aren't talking about, that so many of us are pushing into the shadows and that we don't want to face because we're afraid. But what I have found is that in facing death, in unlocking its medicine and embracing the finiteness of this life, it actually amplifies our aliveness. It helps us focus on what truly matters and dissolves fears and doubts and limiting beliefs, because so much of what we fear is actually rooted in death, in our need to survive. So yeah, have any of you guys ever felt like the very thing that you have been avoiding and trying to push away is actually the thing that the universe like wants you to embrace? Like often it's the path of most resistance, where we're actually going to grow and expand and like reach that next edge. Well, this is kind of what was happening to me, right? So after I had this epiphany around death is the key to making the most out of life, I started looking back on my life and like extracting the lessons of death medicine. And this is what I really want to share with you. These are principles that have been guiding my life. And I've been incorporating different practices to help me bring death into the forefront of my day to day so that I can live with the end in mind. I can live a life of no regrets. I can live, I can make the most of this one precious life, because you only get one life. YOLO, baby, right? That's actually going to be the name of a new year-long experience that I am creating. I'm going to drop it in the show notes. You can get on the wait list right now. But this is some of the lessons that we're going to be infusing into that year-long experience to help us all make the most of our time here. So the first lesson in death medicine, and there's so many, I've really tried to like distill these down, but death really invites you to stop waiting and act right now. When Ian was diagnosed with cancer, we didn't know. The future suddenly became uncertain. We didn't know if he'd have 1 month, 1 year, 5 years, right? We didn't even know if he'd make it at all. And so what that did is it forced us to stop delaying and start living, start making that bucket list trip with our family, take the flight to Spain and Italy, do the things that we would have usually waited on because we were too busy or we didn't have the money to do it, or we just, procrastinated and said later. Like, how many times do you do that? Do you make an excuse and don't do the things that you actually want to do because life just gets busy and we think that we have time? But what death has taught me, and I invite you to think about, is that death is literally like we could die any day at any time. And this really isn't to scare you. It's not. But I just want to shatter the illusion of control a little bit and help us realize that tomorrow actually isn't guaranteed. And I know you know this because many of us have received phone calls from friends, right? Where it's like, yeah, like, so-and-so passed away. He had a heart attack that night, or they got in a car crash, and it changes that quickly. And what our subconscious does is it tries to block that out. And it says, oh, no. That's just a them thing. That couldn't happen to me. And what I want, if you're doing that right now, if you're distancing yourself from this truth, because again, like this is a threat to our mortality. This is it. Our survival mechanisms are wired in like so strong. I did the same thing and it happened to us as well. So let's not wait for like a trauma or an accident to actually start living and like shatter the illusion that the future is guaranteed, and instead start acting now. The medicine number one is that death invites us to act now. The next one is that death wakes us up to what actually matters. When Ian was diagnosed and we were like looking at this uncertain future, and he was really faced with this reality that he might not be here anymore, it forced both of us to evaluate how we spent our time. Because when you are under the illusion of control and that every day is guaranteed, that the future is promised, you don't spend your time as wisely, right? Like if you think you have a year to do the things that you want to do versus 1 month, you're going to make different choices. And so that's what we did. We quit our jobs. We moved closer to family. We took the trips, like I said, the bucket list trips. We planned a camping trip across the country with our 4-month-old and our 3-year-old at the time, driving from Colorado to California. Ian spent time golfing with his friends. There were lots of moments where we just sat around the couch and talked story and had conversation. And, it really helped us savor those moments and turn the cuddles on the couches into something really sacred where we could savor it. And it wasn't just like a moment where you just kind of that you take for granted, right? Like death. And another thing about death, and something that I have been working on this year, is these mortality visualizations that I've done on myself. I've done them with clients in my wake up calls, which I'll also link in the show notes. I'm also going to be running these deathbed visualizations as a part of my free 3-day immersion called No Regrets coming up at the end of the month. And this is where I guide clients in to their deathbed in a very safe and gentle and held way. And we look at your life from the end, and I guide you into prompts where it's like, what are you doing with your time? Are you fulfilled with the way that you're spending it? And if you were to die in 3 months, 1 year, I change the timeline depending on the intention of the exercise, what would you regret not doing? And then you come out of the visualization and you have this clarity around what really matters. And it's clarity that cuts through all of the societal shoulds, all of the fears, all of the things that we feel like we need to do. And it gets straight to the callings of the soul and of our heart, to what actually matters. And so when you leave these visualizations with that clarity, you can then make shifts in your life, because death also invites us to stop waiting and to do the thing right now. The next key lesson that death has really unlocked for me, or embracing death and my mortality into my day-to-day life, is that it unlocks the abundance that's already here. If you were to come back with me into that image of Ian savoring his popsicle, I want to cry, in the sun, just taking it all in, it tasted that much juicier, and the sun probably just he felt it in his skin even that much more, just knowing that it would all end. And how many times do we just take the sunrise for granted? Do we take the breeze touching our skin? Do we take just the ability to move our bodies, or that moment in the morning when you hug your kids, because we think that it's guaranteed? And again, it's not. And so as I continue to contemplate my own mortality and recognize that nothing is guaranteed in my life, it makes me savor these moments that much more. I can't tell you how many times I have just cried after a workout, driving home, and I see the sun, and I feel like the blood moving through my body and the air circulating my lungs. And I'm just like, oh my God, what a gift it is to be alive. It really is. And I'm going to cry. We miss so much of it because we're just moving so quickly, and we just take it all for granted. And it takes so little to make the deepest parts of ourselves fulfilled and happy. And yeah, so death really anchors us into the magic of the moment and all of the gifts that we're just so detached from and don't see in the hustle and bustle of day-to-day life. Part of the reason that we miss so much of the magic of life and that we're taking things for granted and moving so fast is because, I kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the episode, we're so attached to needing things outside of ourselves. And death really shows us our attachments and teaches us radical acceptance and unconditional joy. So I have a story to just root this down a little bit. When Ian was diagnosed with cancer and I was pregnant with Theo, and Izzy was just 1.5 years old or something. I can't do the math. They're 2.5 years apart. But I remember telling the oncologist, I was like, you cannot let him die. In my mind, I was like, there is no fucking way that I can survive this life, that I will ever be happy and joyful without him in my life. We were meant to do this together. And so I was still under this false illusion of control, right? But he died anyways. And in that moment, everything that I thought I needed to feel joy, to feel love, to feel safety, to feel freedom, I remember feeling so trapped being a solo mom, was gone. And so death really, like, it forced me to see how attached I was to all of these things outside of myself. But in the stripping away and in this like hitting rock bottom where I was just like so bare and had nothing, I could see that I still had the choice, right? I could choose to see everything that I had lost and think that like there's no way that I can ever be happy, or I could choose to find joy, to find love, to find liberation in other ways. And so I did that. I found happiness in some of the other ways, in some of the new pathways and possibilities that were opening up for me. I found gratitude in the smallest of moments, right? Like I just talked about, like in my heartbeat and the fact that my kids were still there. I became my own best lover, my own best friend. I became whole by myself, but all of this took a conscious choice. I was no longer attached to the things outside of me. Death had forced me to let go. And so death teaches us that like we have to surrender to things outside of our control, and that we can take back power and control in our response. And so I just want you to think about like how many things in your life right now are you attached to? And I'll again take my own example. Like 2 years ago, I was very attached to clients and impact and success. That's what I thought I needed for me to be worthy, for me to be happy. Like I equated success with my worth and my happiness. And so what I have done in realizing this attachment is I literally think, okay, if your business were never to succeed, if you were to fail, would you be okay? And I see myself walking myself through that situation, and I remind myself I'm fine, because my worth and my happiness is not found in those things outside of myself. It's found within. And that's changed the entire frequency through which I operate my business from. I lead from love instead of lack. And so for you, where are you attached? Where are you like addicted to the hustle and the proving and the chasing because you think that you need that thing outside of yourself to feel a certain way? Well, death is going to imagine death stripping it all away. And maybe it's not death. I'm talking physical death, right? It's metaphorical death, an ending, the closing door where it says, you shall not pass. This is no longer accessible to you. It could be a divorce too, a relationship ending. And where are you attached to thinking you need that person, you need that thing in order to feel love, to feel joy? Death strips it all away and shows us that it's found within. And then this last lesson that's really powerful is that death helps us dissolve fear. You know, I think back to the moment when Ian passed away, and I was just like rock bottom, and I felt totally jaded about the idea of going back to a 9-to-5 job. And I really wanted to do something more meaningful. I wanted to start sharing my story. I wanted to help other people heal. And literally the idea of like failure didn't even cross my mind. I had already lost it all, right? I was like, and maybe if it did float by my mind, I was like, if I just help one person, I'm going to be happy. So if I try this whole thing and I fall flat on my face, like great, I'm already at rock bottom and I'm okay. And so what I invite you to think about is death helps us dissolve fear, because so many of our limiting beliefs, our perfectionism, the self-doubt is rooted in our fear of failure, our fear of rejection, our fear of being cast out from the tribe of love and belonging, right? Like if you go out there and express yourself fully, then that person's not going to love me anymore. I'm going to be cast out. And again, and if I'm cast out, then I'm not safe. I can't survive. This is like going back to like tribal days, right? Where it's like you found safety in the tribe. And so many of these fears are all rooted in the same. It's all back to our survival, which is around our fear of death. So if you can look death square in the eyes and realize like we're all going to die, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And as you contemplate that more and more, your fear of death starts to dissolve. And we do that because if you're facing death, Like, of course, we all hope that it's at the end that we die, right? But at least we need to be thinking about it so that we can plan accordingly, like having our shit together for our loved ones, doing the things that matter now. And, you can't be living your bucket list life every single day, but you can be balancing it alongside the to-dos, right? Like every day right now, I'm like, all right, I have my list of things that I need to do for safety, for making ends meet, for surviving, right? Taking care of the kids. And like, what is one thing that's going to crank up the volume on my vitality, my joy, that's going to bring me some intrinsic benefit, right? So holding both. And then this idea that like, we can die at any time. Well, if you're already crossing those items off the list and you're thinking proactively about what would I regret, right? Would it be not resolving that conflict with my mom? Would it be not telling my kids that I love them? Would it be not going for that podcast or that book? Like, what would be the thing that you couldn't leave this world behind with peace? What would be the big thing that would leave you feeling unresolved and not ready to go? And so that's what the point of this work is, so that death isn't so scary. And in dissolving our fear around death, it dissolves the limiting beliefs because I'm no longer afraid. Like I just get to move from this, like I know I'm okay, I'm safe, I don't have to survive. That like that fear of me being ousted from the tribe is actually just like old coding around my survival. And so we start to untangle it all and we start to live from this place of love and truth. We get to move from this place of love and truth and like freedom to be exactly who we're meant to be because there's no longer any fear. So, I'm like so lit up by this work. And I just hope that this conversation is starting to change some of the fears and the doubts and the like hesitation around this concept of death, because there is so much medicine in death. Like I said, without death, there is no life. It's like light and dark, grief and love. They're like the same, they're the opposite side of the same coin, right? And so when we block out one, we kind of dull the experience of the other, because it's in the contrast that adds that dimension and that full spectrum of what it means to be alive. So I hope that this conversation landed with you. And if it did, I invite you to leave a comment, to share it with a friend. I believe that this is like the medicine that is going to change people's life and wake us up to just the preciousness of this moment, of this life, this one and only life. And if this content resonated with you, I'd love to invite you into this experience with me. You can come to my freebie, which is going to be at the end of the month. It's called No Regrets. We're going to talk about how death can help us dissolve fear, really snap into action around what matters, and wake us up to the wonder of this precious life. I will be sharing death medicine. I will be guiding you through a visualization, and I will also be giving you different tips and tools and practices that you can take to integrate this work into your life. And one of the tangible things that you'll walk away from this workshop is like, how do you want to end 2025? What are the things that you have been waiting on? And so that's really the timeline that we're going to work with. Maybe it's, a project that you've been delaying on, or maybe it's just like wanting to be more present for the holidays. Well, what needs to shift in your life so that you can do that? And we're going to use death medicine to help you gain that clarity and to create those shifts in your life. And then I will be launching a year-long experience off the back end of that workshop, and that is called the YOLO Experience. The YOLO Experience isn't just like your typical coaching program, nor am I your typical coach. I see this as a movement. I see that I am a leader of a movement, and around this like new paradigm for living, where we're meeting death daily, talking about our mortality and using it to amplify the abundance in our lives, to release attachments to the things that we don't actually need outside us, but are keeping us disconnected from life because we're chasing and proving and doing all the things, right? It's already right here, to help us prioritize what actually truly matters, and and how to balance that alongside the day-to-day life of the things that we do actually need to do, right? So much of this is about holding duality. It's not either or. It's holding what needs to get done in the short run, but am I actually still, making sure that I'm living a life that I would be proud of when I die. So the YOLO experience is coming. Just imagine this community of people rooting for you, cheering for you to pursue your goals, to stop waiting, to start living. It's going to be so good. I will be sharing a bit more about that in upcoming episodes, but for now, just jump on the wait list. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Yeah, I'm really excited about this next evolution of work, and it's changing my life, and I hope it'll change yours too. So subscribe, leave a review, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening in to It's Just Me, Emily. I hope that you enjoyed the show. If you did, it would be a great honor if you could subscribe and then leave a review. And if you do so, I will send you a beautiful hardback copy of my book, Love and Grief, to the first 20 people who subscribe and leave a review. When you do that, it just helps my podcast get boosted and more people will be able to come in and view the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you in another episode.